everybody, it's Rebecca from the Thriving School Psychologist, and I'm so happy you're here. And happiness is the word of the day because I am here with the one and only Nataly Kogan, who is the CEO of Happier and also has just written this fabulous book, Happier Now, which I devoured in like one sitting. So welcome, Nataly.
I'm so happy to be here. Hi, everyone.
Yay. So the reason that I wanted to meet with you, Nataly, is because I've been working with hundreds of school psychologists across the country who are very dedicated professionals, and they tend to put themselves sort of at the other end of the self-care spectrum. So they have a deep obligation to others, but myself included and my people I work with say things like, gosh, I don't have time for self-care, or self-care are really, really nice, but I really have to get this, done for the student, and the family's counting on me. So in a way, sometimes doctors make the worst patients. And so in this case, sometimes myself included, school psychologists are not the best at self-care. Do you have any strategies that you can give us to make sure that we don't burn out?
Yeah, and I do. And I'm so, as I said to you before, I'm so grateful to be able to share these because it's a huge passion of mine to share these lessons and these science-based practices with caretakers and caregivers of others, because those are the people like you guys watching, guys and gals, who, as you say, sometimes can really run the well dry. And so let's do kind of three of my favorite tips. And the first is, this whole idea around I don't have time for rest, or I feel too guilty to rest because I have other people, students or family, et cetera, to take care of. One of the most kind of, for me, mind-shattering pieces of research that I came across when I was working on my book is around rest. And I used to think of rest as doing nothing. And so who has time to do nothing? I don't. My to-do list is up to here. I'm a mom. I run a company, right? But rest is not doing nothing. There's a part of our brain, it's called the default modal network. It's the part responsible for creative thinking, processing, and organizing information. That part of the brain only comes online when we disconnect the frontal cortex, when we give that thinking, doing, emailing, like planning part of the brain a break. And so don't think of rest as doing nothing. Think of rest as an essential element of being your best. And so, a practical way to implement that would be, I call it a 10-minute happier reset. So every day, can you pick a time on your calendar? For me, it's 3 p.m. every day, and it's 10 minutes. And I know that doesn't work with a school schedule. So pick a time when that works for you. Put it on your calendar, and that's your 10 minutes to take for what I call constructive rest. It can be anything that fuels you. Reading, going outside to take a walk, having a piece of dark chocolate and not looking at your phone for a few minutes. Whatever it is that makes you feel nourished is constructive rest. Put away your phone, put away your computer, put away your paperwork. And research shows that when we alternate periods of focused work with that kind of constructive rest is when we're most productive and most creative. So that's the first piece around rest. And so anytime, like my daughter who's 13, she's like the voice of reason now, because whenever I'm like, oh, I don't have time to rest, I have so much to do, she's like, Mama, remember what you write about in your book, what you always talk about. Rest is not doing nothing. And so that's just, to me, a really powerful reminder. The second is around another aspect of self-care, which I think most of us struggle with. I know I did for a long time. And that is how you talk to yourself. And so here I'm getting to self-compassion. And not often, I'm going to go ahead and say in almost all cases, the way that we talk to ourselves when something goes wrong, when we make a mistake, or we don't live up to our crazy expectations of ourselves, the way we talk to ourselves is not a way that we would ever talk to anyone we care about or anyone we take care of. We are much harsher. We are mean sometimes. To all of you listening, like, I want you to think about when you make a mistake, what do you say to yourself in your head? Are you kind and supportive the way that you would be to a student? No. Most of us, I can't say this on Facebook Live. I can't say this in a recording, the words that I use towards myself. And so for the longest time, I really struggled with self-compassion. And I've taught courses on self-compassion. I hear this from people. We struggle because we feel that to treat ourselves with compassion when we make a mistake means that we're not going to be motivated to improve. But it's actually the opposite. So research shows that self-compassion increases motivation. So reacting to your own mistakes with compassion. And what is compassion? Compassion doesn't mean it lets you off the hook. Compassion is simply recognizing that you're a human being, you're imperfect, you make mistakes, and the goal of compassion is to reduce suffering. That's all you're doing. And so they've done a lot of research, actually also about students, that those who react to mistakes or failures with self-compassion are twice as likely and twice as motivated to improve. So treating yourself with compassion is not about letting yourself off the hook. It's actually the best investment into being your best. And so one of my favorite little practices for increasing self-compassion, practicing it, is this little 3-part thing. So first is learn to hear that mean voice in your head. Like actually becoming aware of the harshness we have for ourselves is really important. That's your first step. When you hear yourself being harsh to yourself, the second step is take a pause. So instead of your instinctual reaction, just take a pause. And as a final third step, imagine in front of you someone you love very much. I always think of my daughter, Mia. And now reframe what you just said to yourself as if you are talking to them. So become aware of your own meanness, take a pause, and then say the same thing as if you're talking to someone that you love. And it's a practice. You're not going to be perfect every time, but it's amazing how the dialogue internally shifts. And my third kind of practice and focus for those of us who are taking care of others is, I guess, less of a practice and more of one of the most powerful reminders. And that is that you cannot give what you don't have. Right? Like you cannot give to others what you don't have yourself. Many of us try. We have this martyr mentality, right? Like, well, you know, I'm exhausted and I'm miserable and I'm overwhelmed, but I'm just gonna I'm gonna hang on there for my students, or I'm gonna hang on there for people in my life. The thing is, you can only do it for a short amount of time. And so whenever you feel guilt for taking time for constructive rest, or you feel like you don't have time to engage in something that's nourishing for you, remind yourself that that is actually diminishing your ability to give your best to the people you care about in your personal life and at work. And the way that I end all of my talks, you know, I go around the country, I give these big speeches, is I ask you to think of someone you care about. And maybe, you know, for all the listeners, think about the students that you care about and how you want them to be better. Well, you can only do that if you fill your own tank. You cannot do it on empty. And so at moments when I get to a place where I'm really run down and I'm not taking care of myself, that's the reminder I give myself that I cannot give my best to the work that I do if I'm running on empty.
Right. There was like 52 nuggets of awesomeness and everything. I was actually scrolling notes. I think that's so critical, Nataly, what you said about the mindset around rest. And I think a lot of us school psychologists feel like rest is a reward and not an integral part of what we need to do all day. I also think that last point you talked about, you can't give what you don't have. What I hear often, and also I hear in my own brain, is like, well, gosh, I could take time now to rest or relax or rejuvenate, but I am going to pay for this later. And I have so much more to do if I don't. And for your own edification, school psychologists are up against deadlines, which, you know, in all professions we are, but we have X amount of days to finish working with that student and hold a meeting and a report that's involved. And so a lot of school psychologists signed up for my online course because they wanted to get some weekends back. They wanted to be with their kids. They wanted to hang out, but they feel like over and over, I hear this, well, if I don't work on the weekends, then the next week's horrible. Do you have any practical thoughts around that mindset around, well, if I take time now, I'll pay you later?
Yeah. And by the way, like to start with, I totally get it. Like I'm not a school psychologist, but my job involves helping others. And I feel that all the time, like, oh, like I've got a bunch of, you know, I need to write this email or I need to schedule this happier at work workshop. And like, if I don't do it now, like it's a Sunday, it's just going to be more work Monday. And the thing, I remember I was taking a meditation workshop and this master who was teaching a couple of years ago, he said something really amazing and it really stuck with me. I think it's in my book. He said,
I'm ready with my pen.
Well, this is a philosophical point. I'll get practical from it. But he said, you know, one of the most famous sayings in Zen Buddhism is you should meditate for 20 minutes a day. If you don't have 20 minutes, you should meditate for an hour.
Oh.
And it sounds like it's easy, like, oh, woo-woo to dismiss, but it's actually scientifically been proven true. So, and this is not a thing about meditation, but meditation, people who meditate, for example, are much more productive, and they say they feel they have more time. Meditation is a form of resting the frontal cortex, the doing, the et cetera. So the thing that I take from that saying and from the research that shows it, that if you take time regularly to refuel, so not waiting until you're totally burnt out, you're increasing your capacity to get stuff done. So you can have an hour of work exhausted, and you can have an hour of work refreshed. And all of you know that the refreshed hour, you're going to crank stuff out, and it's going to be better stuff, and you're going to get it done faster. Right. And so to me, my practical thing would be, is to be really honest with yourself. If I am exhausted or even resentful that I have to be doing this work right now, how effective am I being? Am I better off to take this hour to refuel by being with my family, by going outside, whatever it is? And then I can come back to this paperwork or the report that I have to do. I am that much more energized. My brain can actually get more done faster. And I think it requires us to be really honest with ourselves that not all work is the same work. Right? Just because we're sitting in front of our computers 8 hours on a Saturday does not mean we're getting 8 hours of work done. If we're tired, if we're resentful, if we're stressed, overwhelmed, if we wish we weren't there. And so to me, the way that I treat rest is, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I kind of constantly have this like barometer where I remind myself, like, wow, you're really feeling exhausted right now. Like, this email that you're going to be trying to write, it's going to take you 2 hours. If you take this hour to go take a yoga class or whatever, hang out with your daughter, you can write this email in 45 minutes. And so it's being really honest with ourselves that not all work is the same, and that a refreshed brain can get a lot more stuff done.
I think that's really smart. And I think that it also folds into that second point you made about self-compassion. And I think any school psychologist would advise another school psychologist, so you're feeling drained, burnout, and have a lot of work. I think you ruin your weekend. I mean, none of us would do that, right? Or say, like, why didn't you get it done sooner? Or
exactly.
You should have been more efficient, or right. And that's how we talk to ourselves. So I think that mindfulness piece of catching yourself, being like your own worst critic, you would never talk to a colleague like that. So why are we doing that to ourselves? Right.
Exactly.
So
and I love that you took that even a step further of like, I never even thought about the weekend part that way. It's not just how you talk to yourself, it's the advice you would give, right? Like, what intelligent person, forget school psychologist, what intelligent human being, if their friend was telling them that they're really exhausted and overwhelmed, would say to them, you know what I think you should do? I think you should work this weekend. Yeah. Nobody would say that. It's ridiculous. Why do we think that we are exempt from normal humanity, right? And this is the part about being really honest with ourselves, right? That it's, and we also, the other thing I just want to acknowledge that, I am not a school psychologist, but we all live in this culture that is obsessed about productivity and getting stuff done and like being so efficient and productive and sleeping only every other day. Like, this is our culture, right? And yes, I know that you guys have so much to do. We all do, but it also takes discipline to be really honest with ourselves and realistic and be like, okay, well, this is my life. I have work, I have life, I have me. Like, how do I feel about how it's arranged right now? Because the thing is, and I can really relate to this. I love my work, right? Like, I love doing this. I love that I get an opportunity to share the science and what I've learned. And so what that leads me to do often is just do too much of it because I love it so much, because it brings me so much meaning. But then I start doing crappier work. I start making, mistakes in the emails I sent. The proposals we send are not as great. I don't write pieces of content that are as moving or inspiring or practical, right? The work actually suffers. And so I think there's those two pieces, which is understanding what is the advice we would give to people we love and how would we talk to them. And then there's also just the honesty about, hey, this is really impacting my ability to do my best work. And that's what I care about. And so I really got to do X, Y, Z to improve, how I feel and refuel.
Yeah, and I think that really will resonate with the school psychologists who are watching this, because we do care so much about our profession and our
Mhm.
students and the families and the teachers we work with, and we want to give, give, give. But, I have this quote that I put in my course for school psychologists that's, you'll never be in your rocking chair in retirement wishing you'd written a report just a little faster. You know,
Yeah.
And that helps me. That gives me my stopgap for like, wait a minute, my little ones are little and they are not going to be little. I'm
Mhm.
never going to regret, going to that Girl Scout meeting or, going swimming with my babies. I will regret
Right.
sitting
Not doing
there
those
and
things.
wasting their childhood fun doing reports. So I think that there is a discipline around it, and there's always like the, bigger, better, faster, stronger. If you could just get more life
Mhm.
hacks, and that's part of
Right.
it. We can all get more efficient, but I think we also need to be really strategic. And I really appreciate everything you've said about that. One of the things, for those of you who haven't read Nataly's fabulous book, it's super practical.
Mm.
And that's what I love about it. It translates research into reality, and it's not super hard things to
Mm-mm.
do. It can be hard to be disciplined about it consistently, but there are practices in here that are very practical and very applicable to anyone, but particularly to school psychologists who spend so much time helping others. So
Others.
this is the
Yeah.
gift you can give yourself. Nataly, can you tell me a little bit more about where folks can go to find more information?
Yeah, for sure. So the best place to go is our website, happier.com. There's tons of content there, and I subscribe. I write a weekly newsletter, which I write myself, and it usually has a story and a practical tip. You can buy the book at your favorite bookseller or online. And as you mentioned, I think I just want to geek out on this. There's something like 37 little practices in there, because I think of happiness as a skill, and all of these are skills, including self-compassion. So there's like 37 one-minute practices in there. And on Happier, you can find tons of resources about our Happier Work program, about the online course that we have. And I know we're sharing a coupon code with all you guys, so you can take the course for a lot less. And the final thing I'll share, we are, most of my speaking is done privately, so to companies or conferences, but I'm traveling a lot, talking about the book, and we're doing meetups in a bunch of cities. So if any of you are listening are in San Francisco, or Toronto or Boulder, we actually have meetups scheduled there. So if you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll get a chance, because I'd love to meet folks in person. And so San Francisco is the one we know about. It's going to be June 14th at the Book Passage, about 7 p.m. So my favorite way is to connect to people in person. So I'll throw that out there in case any of the listeners are in San Francisco and around that day.
Okay. So that's fabulous. So it needs to
No, I think I'm losing the connection to you.
things right below so that we don't lose you. She's back. Yes.
There you are. Okay. Yes.
I have to tell you, one of the best happiness practices that Nataly taught me is to imagine your life without something. And so that was a moment for me where I was like, oh, that's so frustrating. This is annoying. The internet's not working. And then I just have to go for 1 second to life before the internet.
Mm-hmm. Imagine life without this. It's one of my favorite practices. And I was taught it actually by girl students at a school in Africa where I went to teach some of the Happier workshops. And these were the girls. They have nothing. They literally have nothing. And yet they're so grateful for every little thing that we take for granted, like having a roof over their head and having 3 meals a day and having a chair at a school, because most schools in Africa, you have to bring whatever it is you're going to sit on. And so that's where that practice came from, is just imagine life without this. And my favorite time to use it, as you said, is when something is broken.
Yes.
So the garage door was broken, or there was a ton of traffic, or, whatever, my husband got the wrong kind of milk at the store. And that like snap is like, oh my God. And I'm just like, imagine life without this. Imagine that you don't have a husband who goes to the store to get milk. Imagine there is no milk, and I grew up in Russia, right? Like I actually have this perspective, and it's easy to forget. So yeah, it's one of my favorite practices. Whatever is annoying you, imagine your life without it for a moment. And It's amazing. It's a way to practice gratitude.
I love that one. I use it all the time, and I just used it with my internet connection.
Oh, I
So I do want to make sure, I want to reiterate what Natalie was saying when it was kind of getting funky, which is go to happier.com. And it sounds like you're having a meetup in certain areas of the country. I'm in the Bay Area.
Yeah, we'll be in San Francisco on June 14th.
Woo-hoo, all right.
At the Book Passage, probably around 7 p.m., but subscribe to the newsletter and we'll let you know for sure.
Yeah, and if you're watching this at a later time after that's passed, then guess what? There's more. Go to happier.com. And then I just want to kind of end with something that will be really helpful, something that I did, which is the 21-day Happier course. And like Natalie said, she's going to give you a coupon code for that. It's 50% off of the course, which is a smoking deal. And certainly there's even no price on your own happiness. But if you go to her website and go to the online course and put in all lowercase, Happier You, right?
Yeah.
Happier You, you can get 50% off her 21-day happiness challenge course. And it's fabulous. And it's really, really applicable for school psychologists. I have, in fact, used some of those practices and then I repurposed them for some really fun and exciting blog posts. And I know you love to blog, so I can't wait to read about a blog post of how you're helping school psychologists now.
I love it.
And we really, really, speaking of gratitude, super appreciate you taking the time to join us. And we hope to have you again and on my little show. And, I hope we can meet up too in person. This has been really wonderful.
I love it. And I'm so grateful at the opportunity. I know how busy y'all are. So I'm just so grateful at the opportunity to share some helpful ideas with you that you can use, so that you can give more of your best, because you're out there helping our kids. And I have a teenager, so I know how important your work is. So thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Natalie.
Totally my honor and my pleasure.